creativity is open. It's not a closed concept, and it really can be anything. So focusing on where you feel the best, what makes you feel good when you do it, I think that's your genius. And I think that's where you need to shine more light on, spend more time on, and allow yourself the freedom to explore.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our podcast, From the Magic Pencil, Voices of Writing Through. I'm Sue Guiney, founder and executive director of Writing Through, and I am really excited to spend some time now speaking with one of our board members, an all-around really fascinating person, Votey Cheav. I met her a few years ago, and she has a very wide range of interests and abilities and skills, and I'm really happy that everybody can meet her in this way. Hi, Votey, how are you?
Hi, Sue. Thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be with you today and share my experiences and also just my passions with writing through as a Cambodian American and having the refugee experience and living in Cambodia. It's really a wide range of how much the arts have touched me.
That's great. Maybe you could just tell everybody a little bit about your background and what you're doing now. You're living in Paris, which sounds like a real chore. I'm so sorry.
Yes, so I'm currently in Paris and I am finishing my executive MBA, and it's kind of a different route from where I started. So I was born in a refugee camp in Thailand. My parents survived the Khmer Rouge genocide along with many other Cambodian Americans, and we immigrated to Cleveland, Ohio. I went to university in the States and also went to law school in the US, and somehow ended up in Cambodia after law school, which is where I met you, Sue, and we worked on a really lovely university project together. And life happens, COVID happens, and I was in London and now in Paris, trying to satisfy the business aspects of where my professional projects are headed.
Yeah, so where do you see all of those different strands coming together and leading you in the future?
That is a great question. And I think the type of perspective that I've had to embrace is the unknown. We've all experienced a lot of difficulties in the past few years, especially because of COVID, but also just the uncertainty of knowing the future. And it's a reminder that we have to really just embrace the present. For me, it's looking for purpose in everything I do. Trying to anyway. And a big part of that is letting my creative side take center stage now. I think in the type of society we live in, it's really important to blend the creative with the more rational. Just based on my schooling, in the US, it's really a focus on maybe more of the academic side and not the creative. And I think that's a disservice to a lot of students who can flourish more deeply.
And I know that you write poetry as well. How does that figure into all of that?
Yes, I do. So it really was something that I loved since I was young. Not really something that my family, introduced me to. It was just a seed that was already planted in me, I suppose. And I feel very, very blessed to have that inspiration, because for me, it's a release and is a powerful language that people can really utilize to express feelings and anything. Poetry for me as a Cambodian American is an outlet to really bring out the lost voices as something that I think writing through really encourages too. It's the maybe marginalized or forgotten stories that we haven't had a chance to hear. So it's an opportunity for me to really use words as a method to tell a story in the best way that I can from my perspective.
And do you think that there is some one or two influences in particular, either in your life growing up or in your education, that has shown you how you could bring all of these different strands together?
It's not, for me, it's not so much who you meet or a particular person, but I think we can take inspiration from everyday things, including experiences, things you find beautiful, a feeling that never leaves you, a moment that you always come back to. So it's really been kind of a culmination of all of those things in my life that I've been so blessed to experience, just based on all of the places I've lived, the wonderful and diverse people I've met. But the inspiration takes its root from there. And as a child, I was really lucky because my parents encouraged my love for reading. And I think reading a lot and being curious is something that goes hand in hand with writing. You have more confidence, you have more in your toolbox, I suppose, to be more creative and have that free reign.
It's fascinating. And this season, we're really focusing on creativity and what does creativity mean, and finding that there are a lot of different definitions. I had a recent conversation with Dara Hoyt from Far Circus, and he was talking about creativity very much in the same way that you are, that we are all creative, and every decision that we make every day is a creative decision. He said, when you decide what to wear in the morning, that's a creative decision. When you decide what to eat or what to cook, that's a creative decision. Do you agree with that?
I think that's a beautiful way to put it. And just to extend it further, for me, creativity is really about freedom. It's giving ourselves and others the freedom to think, to dream, to act, play, pretend, inspire. And many people believe that creativity is just the final product of a creation. But I would also add that it's the ability to just give yourself freedom. It can include just stream of consciousness writing, or even the power of choice, as you mentioned, what you're doing in the day and how you interact with others. It's giving yourself no boundaries, which I think can be difficult for some, but if we push past that limit, the self-limitation that we impose on ourselves, then that feeling of freedom, I think, is something unrivaled.
Right. And we also talk a lot about that little critic, the editor that sits on your shoulder and whispers in your ear, telling you you're wrong all of the time. How do you ignore that? How do you get rid of that little guy sitting on your shoulder? If you can, do you?
That's a great question. And it's something that I still shift between as a professional and also as someone who loves interacting with other people. The more you interact with others, sometimes the more you take on others' energies and critiques. So it can be very difficult to silence that inner critic. And for me, what I think works is an intentional practice of shifting my mood and my thoughts. And really, for me, the best way is when you focus on gratitude, when you focus on the things that bring you joy and wonder, things that make you feel full of love, then I can shift out of the negative self-talk. And it allows me to open my mind and open that space for more curiosity, and allows for the good things to come in. And it might be in the back of your head, that inner critic, but I think it's an intentional and conscious practice that we all have to do every day, and be more aware of what we're thinking, and also understand that our thoughts are just thoughts. They're not reality, and that we have the power also to focus on other things, more positive things.
I wonder if any of that philosophy comes from your parents and their experience of having to escape the Khmer Rouge, and then having a small child in a refugee camp, and then finding themselves in the US as refugees. But the immigrant experience in the US is not necessarily what our founding fathers had hoped it would be, to put it in a certain way. I wonder, do you see a link back to that?
Sue, that is such a great point. And I think that's not just the story of Cambodian Americans or any refugee, but just humanity as a whole. It's really a choice to perceive our life, whether we are choosing to focus on what we don't have, or we're choosing to focus on the things we have and what we're grateful for. And I think a lot about my parents' experience. as refugees and, the trauma and the horrible things that they've seen. It's something that I write about a lot, just to try to make sense of why this happened and their feelings and how you heal and how you move forward after experiencing something like that. And I think for me, it's intentional thoughts about hope and really knowing that there's always something more beautiful to experience, always something more beautiful to see. And even if my parents did not intentionally place that into our daily practice, I think culturally as Buddhists, there is a sense of release of any kind of pain. You have the power to transmute that and transform it into something more beautiful, to peace. And, it may be too idealistic, but if we all took more accountability for our own choices and actions, I think we could create a more peaceful world for everyone.
I love that. And I know that was one of the first things that really touched me back when I started going to Cambodia, the sense that here is a country that itself was suffering from PTSD after the Khmer Rouge, and every family had one more horrific story after another. And yet there was a sense of, we're moving forward. We can still find beauty in life. It's not a Western approach. It's certainly not an American approach. In the US, I have found that everything is focused on how much money you can make. And there's anger and resentment. Well, he has more than I do. There's all of that underlies so much of the way we interact in the West, and certainly in the States. And I think that also is translating today into a lot of anger that we see. And yet, what I found in Cambodia was the opposite of that. How hard is it to keep that going in the West?
That is so important to talk about, because I think there really has to be an incredible balance between not holding on to and keeping your anger as someone who has experienced very traumatic and difficult experiences, and also balancing that with finding joy and love and hope. What I see, especially in the Cambodian American community, is that often our parents who have sacrificed so much and really have had to have a mentality of survival, they've perhaps buried a lot of the anger or the hurt. So it's upon the next generation to use their own experiences to heal that part of them and create a more loving environment for the current generation and then for the future. So it really does take a lot of work, intentional work, conscious work, to analyze where that hurt is coming from, not take it on yourself, and then also transform it so that you can do something better for future generations. And this is why I love creative writing. It's an outlet to express perhaps anger or any other feeling, and it does not have to be judged. If my parents had that tool to write creatively, I think they would find it more healing. And, it's not a natural instinct for them to seek out a release of emotions through writing. But that's something that I think is so powerful. And what you're doing and what Writing Through is doing is giving people this opportunity, this freedom in a safe space to tell their story, to just release whatever they're feeling. And when you release it, that's when you start the process of truly healing.
Absolutely. And I know the one thing that I struggle with personally, and that we kind of talk a lot about when we are working on group journal entries and Writing Through, is the role of memory and how you hold on to the memory, in that you don't want to forget the history, but you don't let it overtake you. My parents' generation, the memory of World War II and the Holocaust, they couldn't let go of that. The idea that you must never forget. True, I think you must never forget, otherwise we just repeat the horrors. But as you're saying, you have to also let go. So it's kind of a fine line that we have to walk, isn't it? Between holding on and letting go at the same time.
Yes, it's a difficult balance, and I think it's possible. What's more present in our current society is the importance of mental health, focusing on how being healthy is not just about physical health, but also your mental health, your spiritual health. And that, as a holistic perspective, is what makes a human happy and healthy. So it's really great that there's more awareness now about how to shift out of holding on to hurt or memories that we can learn from, but also we have to grow from. So I think that's what the next generation's focus should be. And just what we're dealing with right now is, how do we take our memories and not just focus on them, but how do we learn the lesson from that? And how do we incorporate that into a positive impact for everyone, for ourselves especially, and for everyone we interact with, and for the world as a collective.
One of the basic questions that we're asking everyone on this season of the podcast is, do you feel like you live a creative life? I think you've already answered that, but I wonder, how do you envision or hope to bring that creativity into the business world?
That is a great question, Sue. And I think maybe that's the process I'm currently in right now. And it's been a very fun journey for me. My undergraduate degree was in English literature because I love reading, I love poetry. And then I got my master's in education. And then I also have my law degree. And now I have a business degree. And my parents are like, when are you going to stop? But I guess I love learning. And I think that there's just so much out there that I'm interested in. And I never wanted to put boundaries on my own limits. And in terms of the future with the business aspect, I think, again, we're focusing more on holistic health now, and it bleeds naturally into the business world, where consumers are becoming more conscious about where they're spending their money on, how it impacts the environment, how it impacts communities like Cambodia, especially with fast fashion. Where are you purchasing from? Where's that money going? Who is the end user and who's getting harmed? It's a more conscious buying power that I think is really being elevated. And I'm very excited that the younger generation they're activists and they know they have the power. So in business, it's really important that we work alongside the community, the consumers, and then also a partnership with government too, because they are the ones helping create the policies. So there has to be a deep understanding of how those policies actually affect the community. And now for me, the focus, like you said, as an American, I was raised in a very capitalist mentality. It's hard to avoid that. But the shift has been rather a radical one, where you're not so much focused on the profits, but you're really focused on creating a positive social impact, with the assurance that when you're doing good for the community in your services or your products, that it in turn will create abundance. And that's where the true, lasting, sustainable profits are. So for me, it's not wanting to create something that is just getting rich quick. I'm very interested in creating something that's long-term, sustainable, good for the community, and an opportunity to have everyone share their thoughts and gifts in a really meaningful way.
Yeah, and it sounds to me as if you are saying that the goal isn't to look at the end, but really to focus on the process and the movement towards that end, with the belief and the faith that if you do the process correctly, the wanted end point will come. And to me, that's something that is very hard for people who are artists, whether they're writers or painters or musicians, to really believe that what you have to say and however you express it today, you do it the best you can, eventually it will find its quote unquote market, or it will lead you to something else that is just as creative and fulfilling as the art you are making at the moment. And I know that certainly was my experience. I've written several novels, I've written 2 poetry collections. I have another poetry collection that I'm finishing up now. So my own creative writing is very much who I am. But it was because of that I ended up creating Writing Through, which has been not only the most surprising, but the most creative act of my working life. Well, it makes me wonder, when you were going to law school, Did you envision all of these ideas about business then, or were you going to law school to be a lawyer? Because I know a lot of lawyers. I'm married to one. And that seems to be, for many people, that's the end.
Law school was largely about advocacy. I love to advocate for people. I have, a strong distaste for injustice. And I would also maybe in the future be interested in writing policy. So law school was not just to become a lawyer, but it was to open that side of my brain that knew there was a world where you could make more impact by studying the law and learning how the law works. And I think it's just the beginning of the journey still. I think what maybe we are all very attached to is putting an identity on ourselves. And I really try not to label myself as just an attorney, as an American, as someone, as a business person, all of those, because I find it rather limiting. And putting myself in those boxes prevents me from growing to my full potential, which I think is difficult to do, but we all have it in us. And you mentioned earlier that whether I think everyone is creative, and I truly do think that we all have a sliver of genius in us, whether it's writing or dancing or music. I think there's something unique in all of us that we were gifted with. And in a way, it's our privilege and responsibility to share that gift with others in the community. And I do want to encourage all young people, if you're listening, to really dig into your genius and what makes you unique, and know that you were meant to share it. I think legacy might be a really big word and maybe scary for some, but it's never too early to think about that and really be conscious of what you are leaving behind, what you're creating, and how you can just make positive impact in the future.
Thank you so much for giving that message to the listeners. It's absolutely true. I know that over the course of my life, many times people have said to me, "Oh, I'm not creative." And it's hurtful, not that they're hurting me by saying, but I feel for them, because I think everybody is creative. It's just a matter of whether you can take the leap to pursue that. I mean, how do you address people if they say, "Oh, I'm not creative"?
I think the exercise, which may be a difficult one, is more of a self-reflection for them to take the time and think about what creativity means to them, what in their life has brought them true joy. And usually that's the arrow that points to what they're meant to be sharing with others. We all have these experiences, whether they're beautiful, difficult, any range of all of the human experiences that we can have, but they're meant to teach us something. And we take that adventure, we go out alone, but what we learn along the way, we bring back to the community, and we have to share that with others so that they can gain our wisdom, be part of that energy, and use that wisdom for the future. So for those who may feel that they're not creative, or may have been told in the past by others that they are not creative, I think creativity is open. It's not a closed concept, and it really can be anything. So focusing on where you feel the best, what makes you feel good when you do it, I think that's your genius. And I think that's where you need to shine more light on, spend more time on, and allow yourself the freedom to explore.
And to allow yourself the space to shine. There's some people say, "Oh, you're conceited," or "You're boasting," or put the kind of negative spin on you trying to show your genius. That's hard. Again, it's these fine lines to feel good about showing, see what I can do and I can teach you, but also maintaining humility.
Yes. And I think what we forget is that we have to be our own cheerleaders sometimes. We have to be our best encouragement, because sometimes when we rely on external validation, it can become addictive. And when you don't get it, then you become, again, your own worst critic. At the end of the day, you only have control of yourself and your actions and your thoughts. So that's where I try to stay most of the time. It's very difficult in this world where social media is something that is powerful, but also can be really damaging. And I always think if I had social media when I was younger, I think it would have been really difficult. So a lot of what the youth are dealing with now, I give them a lot of credit for being so brave, because what they have to see and digest every day is meant to tear them down. So, of course, we're always ready to hide what we think is good, because we're worried that when we show it, that others will have negative opinions or rejections about it. But I think it's just so important to always constantly refocus and shift back to your own desires. And I'm really hoping that the future generation focus on that instead of the negative external world outside of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings up another very difficult point that we're all starting to think about more and more now, which is AI. I've had some conversations about it, and the question of, can a computer just replace all writing? And what's the difference between a human writer and a computer? I'm starting to formulate my own ideas, but I'm wondering what you might think, if you have any beginning ideas about that.
AI and ChatGPT is a fascinating topic, of course, for creative writers. And I've played around with several AI writing tools. And at first I was worried, because I was like, wow, this is so fast. This is crazy. Now everyone can be a writer, which is a beautiful thing. However, the fear that I had that potentially this could take over creative writing for good, it was really quelled, because when I read what the output was, I was reassured that the energy that each creative writer puts into their work can never be duplicated. You cannot duplicate a human touch. You cannot put into words the feeling and emotion, the raw energy that gets transformed through words. It cannot be replaced by a computer. However, I do think it takes away from a lot of the pleasure of thinking creatively and letting yourself have stream of consciousness. Maybe now when we're stuck on a topic and we need to brainstorm, we naturally go to AI. Whereas before, I rather enjoy the creative process. I love brainstorming. I love sitting there and just letting whatever come to my mind, because for me, I actually think that's divine channeling. It just comes to you because you're asking for it. It's different with AI. But the positive thing is that it allows a lot of students who maybe have been told before that they are not creative. It gives them an opportunity to feel ownership, to feel confident in something that they can produce, especially with poetry, which I think growing up in the US and a lot of our academics, when we're thinking about poetry, a lot of it is very regimented, rigorous in terms of form. So many students are turned off by writing poetry because they don't know that it can be freeform. It's very open. So perhaps ChatGPT and other programs like that can give students who are more scared of writing an opportunity to experiment and really feel more confident. That's the plus side.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you can see some sort of a plus side. And I do tend to think that it highlights what it means to be human, because all that it can work with is what you put into it. But when you are actually involved in the creative process, that's the stuff that informs what you do. That's the stuff that makes you decide to put that color and not that, or choose that word or not that, because it has to do with everything that has happened to you in your past, who you are, what you've seen, all of that stuff we talk about, writing with the back of your brain, all that stuff that lives back there that you're not aware of enough to give to the computer to turn into whatever you want it to write. So to me, that's what it means to be human. And that's why there hopefully will always be a limitation to what AI can really accomplish in the arts. But I do worry about students who might use it as a shortcut.
I agree about AI. And I think the positive spin on that is that students can never replace that feeling of pride and confidence that they have when they choose carefully each word for their poems. And I think you've probably seen that firsthand many times with your students in the workshops. You see that spark light up in their eye when they know that they've produced something beautiful and from the heart. And it's pretty obvious, but the AI and the computers, they don't have the heart. They don't have that capacity to explain feeling. They can try, but the energy that's behind it, it just won't be the same. So I think as a starting point, using that technology, it may be helpful. But for true artists, those who are doing it because it makes them feel so alive and good, which is what I use poetry for, using AI will never replace that feeling. And I will never chase that feeling from the computer.
Yeah, and I agree, and would actually augment that to say that that's true of all writing, even academic writing, certainly fiction, because with every sentence that you write, there's a choice. There is something that is flat that comes out of AI, and something that is more alive when a human writer is really in touch with who they are and allowing that to be expressed through their words. It's an interesting question. I think it's one that we're all going to be grappling with for a long time.
Yes. I think we also have to trust the audience too. We have to trust that they can discern between a beautiful poem and one that is steely cold and has no emotion behind it. It maybe perhaps is a scary time because AI is just really a really hot topic, not just in writing, but in every industry, potential loss of jobs. But I think it's really a focus on using it as a tool, simply as a tool. We have to make sure that we trust the consumer and the audience and whoever is receiving that to know the difference, and that they will want quality and something authentic, and they will pay for it. So that's kind of the mindset that I'm in right now. And it's really something that hopefully will shape my ideas about any kind of business ventures that I go into, trusting the consumer, the reader, the audience to go after the more authentic product or service.
Absolutely. And the discussion really does go towards the big philosophical question of what does it mean to be human? And I think we've kind of forgotten to ask that question a lot. We get so wound up in the end product or the financial implications of what we do. And that's part of why we're all siloed and so separate from each other in so many societies, that starting to think once again about what makes us different, not only from computers, but from mice in the field. There's something really unique to awareness, consciousness. And I think that would be a very encouraging conversation to really have going forward, to remember what it means to be human.
I agree, Sue. And I really love working with young people because it's really about empowerment and helping them see that this is just the start for them and that they get a choice of how they want their life path to go. Being human in that aspect is really allowing yourself to grow in unconventional ways, not letting yourself be tamed by society, external factors, and sometimes even people closest to you. It's a difficult decision to make sometimes when we have to follow what is best for us. But being human is such a gift because you have that opportunity to explore.
Absolutely. And I think that's kind of part of our role as educators and in writing through and beyond. A student, a young person has lots of pressures, and a lot of them come from parents and family, and a lot of it is economic. And many people are funneled one way or another, or are so constrained that they can't see beyond the blinders. I remember when I started to work in Cambodia, I was working with students, teenagers who were living in Siem Reap, which was the tourist town, still is the tourist town. I used to ask them, what are your goals? What do you hope to do? Well, I hope someday to be a tour guide. That to them was the height, not being a fisherman or a farmer or then a tuk-tuk driver, but to be a tour guide. And I saw it as my job to say, yeah, fantastic. There are other things. What else can you do? What is it about being a tour guide that interests you? Well, I meet other people. I learn about other parts of you could also do that in other ways. So what we are doing is opening minds and at least letting people see, or hoping to let them see, not only as students, but as adults, that there are other paths. There is more. And I think actually as we get older, it's harder to realize and remember that there is more out there.
That's wonderful, Sue. And I think, especially in a community like Cambodia, where it's hard to envision an option besides what you see in front of you, it's so important to show that there's more out there. But it doesn't also mean that you are perhaps telling these children and young people which path to go. That's their own decision ultimately. But I think that when you're focused on giving them the opportunity, giving them the freedom to at least think about it, that's the start. And the encouragement that Writing Through is providing through the creative outlet is such a powerful tool. Because like creativity, I also think everyone has kind of an entrepreneurial spirit in them. These ideas that float through our head every day, like, oh, what if I could do this? And you see a problem and you find a solution in your own head. I think a lot of these children, they are already thinking about these things. They're just scared to speak up, or they don't know who to tell them to. So I think that spirit, the entrepreneurial spirit, goes hand in hand with creativity. And in a community like Cambodia, that's where the future is. That's where the future business leaders are. That's where the future educators are. I think it's just the freedom, giving young people and anyone at whatever age the freedom to think outside of their own expectations and seeing what happens.
And that's the gift, giving someone the freedom to think. Well, I can't imagine a better way to end this conversation, which I go on forever, but it's really been so wonderful talking to you and having this chance to really delve into all of this. Is there anything else, any other last minute things that you might want to say?
Thank you so much, Sue. It's really been a gift to talk to you. And I just want to bring back the message on our opportunity for reflection and taking the time to see that there's so many more beautiful people and experiences that we have to embrace. And personally, writing through has been a great opportunity for me to give back and meet amazing people in the US, in Cambodia, and other parts of the world. And I think it starts with, again, the freedom to be creative. And I just want to encourage everyone to really allow themselves to take the deep dive and be as creative as possible without judgment of yourself and from others, and see what happens, see what flourishes.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Votey. It's really, really a pleasure.
Thank you, Sue.
Next month, I'm joined by an old friend of mine, Dr. Lisa Wong. Lisa is a pediatrician and a very talented musician. We had such an interesting chat about the importance of music and arts education, the fascinating connection between medicine and music, and how growing up in Hawaii helped her become the remarkable woman she is today. Here is a short snippet from our conversation.
With a neuroscientist really showing that your brain is different on art. Your brain is different after experiencing beauty. Your brain is different from playing music. That was always sort of an observation that they couldn't back up with, a picture being worth 1,000 words. So it's, all of these pieces are moving in the right direction, and it's an exciting time.